attempt to get the level of sort of contempt for this organisation conveyed to everyone walking into that building and walking out.
Right. If we take that down, please, and pull up the report after the event, MPS 0739391, the 29th of July of 1992. It's C53, sir. Again, HM1, your identifier on the first page. And if we look at the body of the report, disorder occurred, sorry, before we go to zoom in, disorder occurred, no. If the body of the report indicates that it did indeed attract 100 animal activists from around the country, and it describes them as hurling abuse at shareholders entering and leaving. So that's the sort of thing that you were describing just a moment ago, is it?
Yeah, you're asking me about the sort of, I think, one of the adjectives I've used that would have described this type of activity, yeah.
Yes. And then it goes on, Brenda McNally, who has obtained shares in the company, gained access to the meeting, although his pocket tape recorder was detected by the X-ray machine at the entrance. His attempts to ask searching questions on Boots' vivisection policy also were thwarted when the questioning session was brought abruptly to a halt. So the tactic was it that members of London Boots Action Group would themselves become shareholders and thereby gain permitted access to the meeting?
So that was a tactic used for this event, yes.
And once they were inside, they were proposing, were they, to question the board, question whoever was involved from Boots?
Yes.
But on this occasion, it appears that the session was brought to an end before they got very far.
That's how that reads. Yes, I don't recall how it came to an end, but the build up to it was certainly that.
Your pre-event report recorded that disorder was possible. Your post-event report records no disorder. Can I ask, this is only about 6 or so months into your deployment. How were you going about assessing the risk of disorder for this sort of event involving London Boots Action Group?
Well, this was a national event, and I think, look, it's just because I think this sort of context. Don't worry, I'm only going to give a sentence. Just a reminder of these events which took place over 30 years ago. Boots, the organisation, was such a clear public enemy number one. The organisation, the retail stores on the high street, but specifically the HQ because of their laboratories. Hence the extraordinary attempts to take action in all shapes and sizes and forms, from the most extreme end to the weekly picketing with 2 or 3 people. No one would really have needed me particularly to have predicted at an event such as this, an AGM, the annual meeting by the Boots community, that this would be the subject of attention, stunts, and other forms of activity. So I would liken the assessment of what was likely to happen, and in fact some of that did transpire. So the attempts at stunts within the auditorium, the hurling of abuse, that did take place. The fact that nothing else took place beyond that, I would argue, was because of whatever action was taken between those 2 reports that prevented it.
Are you suggesting that some action might have been taken which prevented disorder that was otherwise intended to occur?
Well, I can't make that definitive link, but my assessment of what could have happened, most of which did, and the absence of disorder, that was ideally the sequence: preemptive reporting, action taken, and disorder thwarted.
Is it possible that, in fact, on this occasion, the London Boots activist group activists didn't seek to cause any disorder beyond that which is described in your post-event report?
Well, it wasn't just London Boots Action Group. This attracted people from outside of that group. The Boots campaign was the central campaign, or one of the central campaigns that had a national following.
Is it possible that the activists present did not seek to cause as much disorder as you thought might have occurred?
Well, it's possible, but there was a high likelihood that such was the tension and the feeling and the sentiment and the commitment that I've described, with no guarantees, it was far more likely and that it would take place and it wouldn't bar preemptive action, whatever that might have been. And all I'd say is some of that assessment proved actually to be the case.
There was, according to Mr. Gravett's evidence, a Boots AGM in 1993 which attracted a large demonstration from activists, but the inquiry has not found a report about it. Do you recall whether or not you reported on that AGM?
I don't recall, no.
Do you recall whether you attended the AGM?
No, the one I attended as part of the protest was the one in London.
We've got reports on the Boots AGM in 1994 as well as in 1992, so we've got the 2 years either side. Does that assist you as to whether or not you might have gone to the one in between?
No, it doesn't. The only one I recall going to was the one at the Quintesswood, the second centre. Unless they are all there.
Let's take down this report. Look at the ones from 1994. MPS 0741018, the 15th of July of 1994. This report bears your security service unique identifier HM1. It's C261, sir. And it is a report on the 15th of July looking forward to an AGM again at the Queen Elizabeth II Conference Centre, but this time in July 1994. Do you see that HM1?
Yes.
And under likelihood of disorder, you have obstruction possible, mood vociferous, numbers likely to attend 60 to 80. And if we look, please, at the body of the report, we see that the AGM will be picketed by animal rights activists displaying banners and placards and shouting verbal abuse at those attending the meeting. It is believed that up to 40 protesters have obtained Boots shares in order to enter the meeting and attempt to disrupt the proceedings. Later in the day, there may well be impromptu demonstrations at Boots branches nearby. So advance reporting that there will be pickets and up to 40 protesters entering the meeting having obtained shares.
Yes, there could be, yes.
All right. If we take that down, please, and look at the report after the event, MPS 0741019, that's C264, sir. HM1, your identifier again on the cover sheet. And if we go down into the report, in fact, the date of it is the 26th of July, so now looking back to events on the 21st. And if we look, please, at the body of the report, there is perceived success about bringing the meeting to a close. It says after about 80 minutes of heckling and general noise abuse, to the obvious frustration of the Boots directors and the anger of their shareholders. It suggested that Brenda McNally, who had made a purchase of shares and redistributed them to other activists, so that around 20 protesters got in to the AGM. You say in your witness statement, it's paragraph 193, if you want the reference, that you were present for this AGM. Is it possible that you attended 2 Boots AGMs?
I don't remember attending 2. It is possible. It is possible, but I don't recall. I recall specifically 1.
The reference in the bottom paragraph on that page is to an internal demonstration coinciding with protesters outside heckling shareholders as they arrived and departed, or entered and departed. In your witness statement, you say that others heckled, but you didn't. You remained outside, but you weren't a heckler. Is that right?
Yes, I think so, as I recall.
Again, did you not stand out as an activist who came along to this event but didn't join in the general activity that was going on?
No, I don't think so.
And why not? Were there others who were simply standing there and not even heckling or making any vocal contribution?
There would have been a whole spectrum of engagement, from obvious hecklers to those that were there supporting in other ways.
And those other ways would be peaceful and lawful in their entirety?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you. Can we take that report down, please? I'm going to move to some other reporting on activities of London Boots Action Group, starting with MPS 0739372, please, on the 29th of July of 1992. And your security service identifier there on the first page. It's C52, sir, sorry. And the report itself submits the latest edition of the group's newsletter. Presumably you obtained that through attendance at the meetings or just association with the group?
Yes.
And it's described as ably produced by Paul Gravett, and then the report lists 5 points of potential interest. Or, in fact, it says specific interest.
Yes.
And I want to ask you about point 3, please, which suggests that the newsletter gives open support to the ALF campaign of direct action against boots and companies that use animals in their scientific research programme. And if we turn, please, the newsletter is in fact attached to the report. So if we could turn through the pages to page 5, please. Thank you. Sorry, bear with me a moment. I may have the wrong page reference. I may have to come back to that one. I may have the wrong page reference. I'm sorry about that. If we focus on the report for now, please. The report summarises what's contained in the newsletter by suggesting it gives open support to ALF direct action against boots. What did that entail in practice, HM1?
Well, I think it's more it's more an ideological statement than a set of orders. It's aligning the campaigning, mission of a desire to bring an end to boots' use of animals through experimentation with absolutely what the ALF stated ideology is as part of its campaign to end animal abuse.
And the ALF stated ideology that the London Boots Action Group newsletter was supporting included what? Direct action?
Well, I think reading that newsletter, which you just flashed up, it is you can see there's open support for the prisoners, as they're described, so people that have been incarcerated for direct action at the extreme end. That gives a flavour. I think just seeing those names of individuals associated with the company and the slogan underneath, "They must pay," it's pretty unambiguous in its commitment to a level of direct action which I'd have thought would have met anyone's threshold of interest if you're seeking to avoid those things happening.
Right, so if we take the examples from the newsletter, if we scroll down to the page with the photographs on and that's what you were referring to, isn't it? Time we made them pay.
Well, that's one example. I mean, there's not much in that newsletter, and if you take all of it in its entirety, I mean, I just would have thought any neutral reader would have come away with an unambiguous inference of the level of support for direct action.
But in terms of this page that you referred to, this page is encouraging people to picket the AGM, isn't it, in particular? If you look at the bottom, picket Boots AGM, isn't it time we made them pay, picket Boots AGM?
Yes, it's there with reference to a specific event.
And then if we scroll down to the text, you're saying that taken as a whole, the text of the newsletter gives the message that there is support there for the sort of direct action that might be taken under the banner of the ALF.
Yeah, and again, you know, some context here. Another really, or another element of direct action was this concept of home visits. And so a picture like that, inviting, campaigning against named individuals, played right to the heart of what across the industry became the subject of personal campaigns, home visits, and harassment. So I think, I say, if you take that newsletter as a whole, it does, to me, certainly convey a level of campaigning that is not to be ignored.
The report describes it as open support on behalf of London Boots Action Group. They didn't keep it a secret that they were supportive, in theory at least, of what the ALF was doing, certainly against Boots, did they?
No, not at all.
If we take that down, please, and look at another report of a London Boots Action Group meeting. This is MPS 0739408, a report on the 11th of December 1992, C107, sir. And again, your identifier on the cover page, HM1. And if we scroll down, it's a report on a meeting, a monthly planning meeting of the London Boots Action Group. Can we look, please, in particular at the third paragraph in the body of the report, where the matter of security is said to have been raised by someone whose name we've redacted, and then to read on, she expressed concern at the open discussion of animal rights matters at meetings in the presence of people who were not known to the group. This has been a recurring theme since London Boots Action Group started, and Paul Gravett and Privacy pointed out that the group published a newsletter easily available to Boots and the police detailing its activities. It was pointed out that no illegal activity should be discussed other than with trusted people, and even then, not at a meeting. And then if we please have a look at the following paragraph as well. Perhaps could we have them both together so that HM1 can see them together? Thank you. Right, it follows, Paul Gravett drew attention to a press release from the West London ALF cell. Attacks on butcher shops and branches of Boots were condoned, but reservations were expressed at the planned campaign against Vauxhall General Motors. There was condemnation also of the ALF cell's plans to follow Boots employees with the intention of damaging their homes. It was judged justifiable to attack the directors and the vivisectors, but not mere employees. It is hoped that the ALF press officer Robin Webb will put a stop to this scheme. So what we see there, it appears, is that at a public meeting, yes, of London Boots Action Group, open to whoever wanted to come along, there was open support expressed for attacks on butcher shops and branches of Boots. Is that right?
Yes.
And also general support expressed for action against directors of companies deemed involved with animal abuse and the vivisectors, but not simply employees of those companies.
Yes, and that sort of that second paragraph, I think, reflects a divergence of views against which campaigns should be focused on and which shouldn't, and within those organisations, who is within scope and who isn't. So no particular unanimous agreement on that, but the general premise of direct action in this way, yes, absolute agreement.
But on the part of London Boots Action Group, at least, it appears that they were not in favour of the idea of involving simple or mere employees of Boots in the sorts of actions that might be taken by the ALF.
So I don't think, as a group, it ever committed to us, if you like, a stated policy when it came to these differences of opinion. This is a summary, as I recall, of the discussion that took place in which these issues were aired by different individuals.
All right, so when it says, for example, attacks on butchers' shops and branches of Boots were condoned, we shouldn't understand that everybody at the meeting necessarily signed up to that as a proposition. It just means that some people present condoned them.
Yeah, although, if I'm reading that again and reminding myself, that reads to me that there was unanimity on that as a starting point, and the disagreement kicks in with the rest of that sentence about reservations.
And that disagreement was, on the face of it, with what is described as the West London ALF cell. Is that right? It's the West London ALF cell who seems to plan to follow Boots employees with the intention of damaging their homes.
Yes.
So a disagreement with those at the London Boots Action Group meeting with that planned course of action.
That's what it looks like to me, yeah.
And also a hope that the ALF press officer, Robin Webb, would put a stop to that suggestion. So not only condemnation of the plan, but a hope that it won't be put into practice.
Well, that would have been the view of an individual, I think. Either that or it's in the press release from the West London ALF cell. I don't recall what was in that press release.
Right, but it is hoped that Robin Webb will put a stop to the scheme. That's unlikely to have been from a press release by the West London ALF cell, isn't it? Because they were the ones planning the action. So
that's why I think it's a comment from someone at the meeting discussing that position.
If it was a comment rather than a consensus of sorts, would you not have written into your report, for example, Paul Gravett hopes that the press officer will put a stop to the scheme, or whoever it might have been?
Well, I could have done.
Wouldn't that have been more useful to the reader of the report if it was clear whether the content of your report was a comment from a particular individual, given that you were reporting on which individuals should be the subject of further consideration?
Yes, and quite often it was, so I'm not quite sure why it's been done in that way, but more often than not it was what you were describing, and yes, it would have been more helpful on this occasion to have ascribed those comments to individuals.
Looking back at the first paragraph, where it says it was pointed out that the first of those two that were on the screen. It says it was pointed out that no illegal activity should be discussed other than with trusted people, and even then not at a meeting. Is that a sentiment that you recognise as having been expressed amongst the members of London Boots Action Group?
Yes, that came up all the time.
And was that the upshot of it, that illegal activity was the subject of discussion, but not at meetings?
Yes, I mean it was never discussed at meetings. That would have been foolish.
Foolish because the meetings were open and public?
Yes, and not everyone knew everyone to the degree that this type of activity was in safe hands.
And those that were going to involve themselves in illegal activity would share that information then only with those that they felt they could trust?
Yes.
So it follows that to the extent that members of this group shared with you their involvement in or plans to become involved in illegal activity, they must have regarded you as somebody that they could trust?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Can we take that down and put up on the screen one further report in a similar vein, MPS 0739418. That's dated the 12th of February of 1993. That's C127, sir. HM1, your identifier on the first page on the cover sheet. And if we look down, this is a report on the London Boots Action Group meeting for February 1993, 30 in attendance. Sorry, bear with me a moment. Yes, can we zoom in? It's the first paragraph, the first full paragraph, please. And I want to ask you about what follows from the word nevertheless, about 2/3 of the way down, please. So you describe the meeting and you say, nevertheless, it is apparent that London Boots Action Group currently enjoys a healthy degree of morale and no doubt benefits from the regular presence of a high percentage of animal activists committed to, and in many cases involved in, the ALF doctrine of acts of direct action in support of animal welfare. At the time you wrote this report, February 1993, you had been in the field for just over a year, is that right?
Yes.
On what did you base the assertions in this part of this paragraph that there was a regular presence of a high percentage of activists, first of all, committed to the ALF doctrine of acts of direct action?
Well, because the complete or the available intelligence to date on the individuals who regularly attended, more often than others, London Boots Action Group meetings were identified in such activity.
Right, so not necessarily your own observations of those individuals, but what you were picking up from intelligence from elsewhere also?
Well, picking up, yes, actually seeing in other intelligence reports.
Right, so you're deployed at this stage, you are seeing with some regularity other special branch material, and that is informing what you say in this report?
Yes, plus it's also, as part of the targeting strategy, those that were known to be or suspected of being involved in direct action, that information was passed to me.
Right, so where you say here, in many cases, the activists had been involved in the ALF doctrine of acts of direct action, we shouldn't take from that that you had, by February 1993, directly witnessed, either by seeing them do it or by them telling you they had done it, their involvement in direct action?
Yeah, absolutely not. No, it's more, these are the named individuals at this group, rest of the machine. Tell me what is known.
Sorry, I'm not sure I quite followed that answer.
Yeah, so I would know who those people were, and they'd be listed in the report, and then the feedback from Special Branch as to what was known about those individuals and their links to and support for direct action would be fed back to me.
I see, but my question was really aimed at how it is that you came to include in your reporting an assertion that a high percentage of those attending the meetings of the London Boots Action Group were either committed to or particularly involved in ALF direct action.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I understood the question. I was trying to make the point of it was with the wider knowledge I had, not from being told directly, but what was already in the system, as it were, with regards to that activity.
What was the utility of you as an undercover officer regurgitating in your reporting information that Special Branch had already obtained in another way?
Well, it was part of the wider picture. There wasn't so there's historic reporting, which is one thing, and then there's current reporting as to the significance of the attendance of people at a regular campaigning group, either with a view to where these individuals are on that journey that we talked about, or in some cases, being able to corroborate that they perhaps are not as interesting from a criminality, direct action, public order perspective than they might have been at one stage.
But might it not give the impression to a reader of this report, somewhere away from the SDS but within Special Branch, that there's an SDS officer reporting on London Boots Action Group who is able to say, from their own personal experience, that a number of people who attend London Boots Action Group meetings are involved in ALF direct action, if you include it in your report?
Well, I think to the customers and readers of this material were sort of connected with the industry and the business and familiar with the generic subject matter, were experts in themselves in the environment, the individuals, the movement, what was going on across the wider community up and down the country.
So you're saying they might expect that in a report that on its face emanates from an undercover officer, there is included intelligence that in fact comes from elsewhere?
Well, in that stated description of who they were, it would have been probably reflected also in the references to their names that appear normally at the bottom of those reports.
All right. Can we take that down, and I'll ask about a different topic, please, which is the Grand National race that was disrupted and declared void in 1993 as a result of activists running onto the course. In your witness statement, you agree that you did go to the location of the Grand National in 1993, is that right?
Yes.
And when you went to the Grand National, you did so driving a number of other activists with you, is that correct?
Yes.
And those activists included Paul Gravett, did they not?
Yes.
He recalls going with you along with perhaps 6 or 7 others. Does that sound about right?
It does, yeah.
And you drove in your van, is that right?
Yes.
And that he says you had volunteered to take people there in your van. Is he
Yes.
right about that?
He is.
How did you come to hear about a proposed trip to the Grand National in 1993?
Oh, I think it would have been one of the things we planned, one of the meetings.
Paul Gravett's evidence was that he recalled it being discussed at the London Boots Action Group meeting in March of 1993. Does that sound likely?
It's highly possible, yes. It would have been at one of those meetings for sure.
The Grand National took place in early April, so presumably that would have been about the right timing.
Yes.
The inquiry has not located a report of a monthly meeting of the London Boots Action Group in March of 1993. Can you think of any reason why, if you attended, you wouldn't have reported that fact?
No, I can't. No.
Paul Gravett's evidence is that at that meeting in March of London Boots Action Group, a discussion was had about disrupting the Grand National race, and that was the purpose of the visit to the Grand National. Do you remember that?
I don't remember specifically, but I mean, the whole purpose of going to the Grand National would have been to bring attention to our cause. So yes, I'm sure disruption was discussed generically.
So when you volunteered to drive people to the Grand National, to Aintree, you understood that one of the things on their mind, at least, would have been possibly disrupting the race?
Well, no, at no stage had I been privy to a plan quite as audacious as that.
What plan were you privy to?
Well, the standard turning up, leafleting, running the gauntlet of people that didn't want to be leafleted at a national event, banners, etc.
Mr. Gravett's evidence was that in the van on the drive up, there was discussion amongst the people who you were driving of disrupting the race by running onto the course.
So that might well have taken place in the back of the van. I was not made privy to that at all, probably deliberately.
Why do you say probably deliberately?
I was regularly under suspicion.
Not by Mr. Gravett?
Well, I assume not.
And were any of the other people in the van people who had expressed explicitly suspicions about you?
Yes.
Did they include George?
Yes.
I'll come.
I don't remember that individual being in the van.
That's what I was asking you. Did it include? No.
Oh no, sorry, no. The suspicions bit I was answering.
Sorry, yes, I don't mean to say George was suspicious of you, but George was not in the van on the way up to the Grand National.
No, there were others, probably still undecided.
But you had volunteered to drive them all there, hadn't you?
Yes, that was pretty routine.
So you say if there was discussion, you didn't hear it?
I definitely didn't hear it.
Are you quite sure about that?
Absolutely positive, yeah. I would have enjoyed hearing about it, that's how I know I didn't.
What do you mean you would have enjoyed hearing about it?
Well, it would have conveyed a level of trust which I knew I didn't have.
So you say that by the spring of 1993, just over a year into your deployment, you wouldn't have been trusted with information about an activity of this sort?
Well, on that specific occasion I wasn't, and I've no idea what the evolution of the real planning was from the trip up there to it becoming a reality. But at no stage in that time frame was I made aware until it was almost, well, as it was in flight, as it were.
Mr. Gravett's evidence is that on the Saturday, the day of the race, you and he were at the entrance area to the course protesting, I think leafleting. Does that ring any bells?
Yes.
And that some of the group, some of the people who you had driven up, had found a way into the course, onto the course, and that they told you that they had. Do you remember that?
No, all I remember is something quickly happening and the event being stopped as a result of people running onto the course.
Mr. Gravett's evidence is that those people asked you and asked him if you were coming with them to go in and disrupt the race.
So I don't recall being asked. I really don't. I do recall a sudden flurry of activity of people quickly leaving the picket line, and as I say, within seconds it was all over.
Where was the picket line? Was it outside the course?
Gosh, I can't remember. It wasn't. Yes, it was outside. It wasn't in an area that required ticket access.
So in order to have got from there to the actual race course, those who went to disrupt the race wouldn't have been able to do that in seconds, would they?
No. The disappearance of those individuals, I remember sort of being there one moment, not there the next.
Could we have up, please, on the screen your witness statement, MPS 0748095. I think it will be page 187 at the bottom, where you deal with this, HM1. It should be paragraphs, thank you, 412B. You say this, the second half of this paragraph HM1, I was too far away from the start of the course to see what went on there, but I did notice fewer people in the vicinity of where I was, which I could then put down to activists going to the start of the course. Does that mean you realised at the time that the fewer people being in your vicinity was likely to mean they'd gone to the start of the course, or do you mean that's what you put it down to retrospectively?
I don't remember the sort of exact sequencing. All I remember was it happened very quickly. The presence of people, the absence of those people, the running onto the course, and the event being curtailed.
If we look over the page at paragraph 412C, please. You said I was unaware of any plans to prevent the race from going ahead. Were you aware of any plans for people to run onto the course regardless of its intended effect?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely positive. I mean, it would have just been considered just so audacious. I'm not even sure when we were planning this whether anyone had that beyond intent or aspiration to do something as straightforwardly dangerous as this.
Mr. Gravitt's evidence is that it was discussed at the London Boots Action Group meeting in March and again in your van on the way up, and you're saying you didn't hear that, is that right?
Well, I definitely didn't hear it in the van coming up. I don't remember specific talks of running onto the pitch as the race was about to start being discussed in open court. I mean, there have been, as I recall it, these sorts of things that have been sort of ridiculously ambitious, sort of aspirational intent, but I don't even remember this coming up as something specific. And by that I mean actually running on sort of almost sort of suffragette style into the path of advancing horses.
Mr. Gravitt's evidence was that after the action had taken place, you learnt that the race had been abandoned, so it wasn't immediately obvious to you, is that right?
It wasn't immediately obvious, no, but I think it was soon obvious because there were tannoy announcements and it quickly became the subject of saturated news coverage.
He recalls you waiting there for the release of those who had taken part in the action because, in fact, they were released without being charged. Is that your recollection?
That is what happened, yes.
Your witness statement says that 1993 was the only occasion on which you attended the Grand National. Are you sure about that?
That's what I recall, yes. I think this one so dominated in terms of the events which have vividly remained with me.
Is it possible that you went again in 1994, which is what Mr. Gravitt recalls?
Well, it is, but it might have been just, the only reason I can't recall now, I just think it must have been so insignificant and nothing happened in comparison with the events we've just been talking about, which is why I can't recall it. I'm not denying I did though.
If we have a look at a report of a meeting of the London Boots Action Group in March 1994, please, MPS 0744660. That's your C224, sir. A report bearing your unique identifier, HM1. And if we go to the body of the report... Oh, I must have the wrong reference. Sorry, bear with me one moment. No, I think I've got the wrong reference on the screen. Oh no, I haven't, sorry. Sorry, it's just my mistake in describing it, I think. So it's this is a report from March of 1994, HM1, sorry for the confusion, which reports that a certain individual is currently determined to mount a high-profile publicity stunt at this year's Grand National at Aintree. Rumours abound within the movement about what might happen at the event, but most realistic activists recognise that it will be difficult to prevent or disrupt the race again. One of Privis's ideas is to fly an aerial banner over the course, and he is exploring the cost of hiring a light aircraft for the purpose. The plan is unlikely to come to fruition if only on the grounds of money. Another possibility under consideration is the blocking of the course where it crosses Mellon Road. It is possible that there will be attempts to damage the course infrastructure in the days before the race takes place. Do you remember coming into information of that nature regarding a Grand National meeting?
Yes.
And did you attend? Does that assist you as to whether or not you attended the Grand National in the year that that individual was contemplating those actions?
I'm afraid it doesn't help, but I'm not denying that I did. I think the events that we've just been describing became so sort of significant, almost sort of folkloric, admired and famous, that anything else sort of to do with the Grand National paled into insignificance on the basis that that wasn't repeated, even if people had the aspiration to do so.
Right. And do you recall ever attending the Grand National in the same year that Andrew Coles also attended?
No, and on the event that I know I did attend, I wasn't aware of him being there.
Were you aware of him going in another year, or not aware of him going there at all?
No idea. Sorry, not aware of him going.
All right, thank you. Just going back then, please, to some more reporting from London Boots Action Group as a group. Could I ask that we have on the screen MPS 0745799? It's your C157, sir. It's a report of the 18th of May 1993, so just after the Grand National. It's got your identifier on the first page, HM1. And could we please have a look? It's a planning meeting, May 93, at paragraph little Roman 2 of the points of interest. And I'll just read this in. It says, Paul Gravett canvassed the views of the group regarding the contamination of products with substances likely to harm the public if consumed. The matter arose as a result of the contamination of Boots products with broken glass, which was claimed by the Nottingham-based animal rights militia. A rift developed between the ARM and Robin Webb, spokesman for the ALF, who refused to announce the contamination as an ALF action on the basis that it was not the policy of the ALF to risk indiscriminate injury to the general public. The London Boots Action Group meeting agreed to follow the ALF line if ever asked to comment on this or similar contaminations. The philanthropic attitude of the group, however, does not extend to those directly involved in the control and management of the vivisection industry, who remain fair game and who are not regarded as members of the general public. Now, on the face of this, whatever was going on with the Nottingham-based animal rights militia, you don't appear to have had any direct experience of what they were doing. Is that right? You're reporting this,
correct,
hearing it from the outside. And it appears to have given rise to a rift between the animal rights militia and the ALF, insofar as there was a spokesperson for the ALF, because it risked indiscriminate injury to the general public. Is that right?
Yes.
And the mood or the view of the London Boots Action Group meeting was that the ALF line was the one to follow, so not risking indiscriminate injury to the general public. Is that right?
Correct, although I note at the end there's a sort of get-out clause.
Yes. Where does that come from? On what basis did you assert that?
I think from the entirety of the conversation that ensued as part of the discussion.
So you think that that is reflecting the nature of the discussion at the London Boots Action Group meeting?
Yes.
Now, given that what started the discussion on the face of it was the question of contamination of Boots products, presumably what is reflected in that final sentence is not a suggestion that there will be some sort of product contamination aimed at those controlling and managing the vivisection industry. It's a reference to some other sort of action, is it?
I think it's a reference to the views held by some in that room that they wouldn't want to be constrained by a policy line when it came to that particular group of individuals who were loathed, if you like, with loathed the most, so those heading up the vivisection industry.
All right. Perhaps some assistance in the same report. If we zoom out of that, please. It goes on at little 3. Following on from this, there was great enthusiasm for the idea of arriving unannounced at the home of a Boots director living in Berkhamsted and holding a demonstration outside his house. Plans for the event will be made in private to avoid disclosure to press or police. So was a visit to the home of a director the sort of thing that the group wanted not to be constrained from doing?
Correct.
The plans in private to avoid disclosure to the press or the police, that was presumably because they didn't want to be interrupted. They wanted their visit to be successful.
Yeah, I think the intent there is that the person is there to receive the message.
Did you regard participation in a visit of this nature to be ALF action?
So that, again, there's no set-piece answer to that. It's an indication that it was, not least because of a pattern of how some of these home visits previously had led to either confrontation or a campaign which was ultimately wasn't just a home visit. It wasn't just a turning up, shouting and going away. It was a more sustained targeting of a person and their family.
Right.
So any one of a number of things, even if not planned, depending on who turned up, could happen.
But the sort of home visit, accepting there may be a spectrum of what could happen, the sort of home visit that you just mentioned, turning up, maybe shouting some slogans and going away again, simply making your presence known, that need not even have involved any criminal offence. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so at that point, none of that was discussed. It was, shall we commit to a home visit? If so, let's do it. Let's do it on a separate occasion and not in this setting.
I want to move then in a bit more detail to the topic of and some examples of home visits with London Boots Action Group in the first instance. Before I do so, in your witness statement, it's paragraph 25A, you say that you always spoke to your managers when there was a proposed home visit. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so this was always managing the tension between a need to prevent the subject of these visits being subjected to harm or disorder that might result in harm, and the need to protect the small number of people that knew about it, which if the police were waiting, might compromise whoever's providing that information.
So you mean, for example?
Well, in this case, me. In this one we're talking about, and so this was a sort of a fairly routine discussion, but it was a very serious one in which ultimately the role of this intelligence was to prevent harm to individuals and damage to property. And then there's a spectrum as to, certainly when it came to damage with no individuals around, whether that could be tolerated, but harm to individuals and their wider family was deemed to take precedence, even if it was through a preemptive warning that had them not there, for example, when the visit was due to take place. So that was something owned by, in discussion with me, the office.
So can I just check that I've understood that correctly? If you were reporting that a home visit was to take place, but the belief was perhaps that the wrong address was going to be targeted or there'd be nobody at home, a decision might be taken to let you go to the home visit and have it go ahead unimpeded by police presence to protect your cover.
Yeah, I think it would be a judgment call, but the only bit to add to that, if I missed it first time round, was what steps could be taken that enabled the subject of the visit just not to be there. It wasn't a question of the wrong address, but not be there when we got there, and therefore there be no one to sort of register to send over.
Right. And if that were the situation, then the balance would fall in favour of protecting your cover and letting the home visit go ahead.
Yes.
But if there was any intelligence reported by you that suggested there might be harm to individuals if the visit went ahead, then that would probably tip the balance in the other direction.
I think it would, but it would normally tip the balance in terms of the individual not being there, as opposed to a police presence being there and ready and waiting.
Andrew Coles, in his witness statement to the inquiry, paragraph 228, for those who are following, suggested that he didn't participate in home visits at all because it would have brought him too close to involvement in potential violence. You didn't come to the same conclusion, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't partake in very many at all, but no, I didn't come to that conclusion. There was an element of, I think on the occasion that I would have been involved, I was transporting people, so I had an element of control.
And certainly your managers, from what you've said, didn't come to the conclusion that this was activity that you shouldn't participate in as an undercover officer?
No, not at all, but it was a very careful discussion on each and every case, which was slightly different depending on what it was about, the nature of the individual and the people expected to be going.
Can we have a look then at some examples, please? MPS 0745801, 11th of June 1993. C163, sir. Your identifier on the cover sheet of this report, HM1, and it's a report on a planning meeting of the London Boots Action Group. And what I want to look at is the list of planned events. And if we look, please, over the page. I wonder if I've got the wrong reference. Sorry, bear with me, please. No, I have. It's paragraph 6, please, and the comment below it. One of the planned events arising from this meeting of London Boots Action Group is described as a picket outside a Boots director's house in Berkhamsted, Hertfordshire. And the comment is, this event is known only to a few persons and is being coordinated by Privacy and Privacy. Final details are yet to be arranged. The comment that this event is known only to a few persons, it must follow that you were one of the few persons who knew about it. Is that fair?
Yes.
And so how did you come to be one of the few persons who was let into the circle of trust in relation to a home visit here?
I think because I was trusted and probably made it clear that if there was a need for transport, I'd be prepared to drive.
All right, so probable that you would have volunteered to drive if necessary.
I think it's probable. I don't remember that being specifically, but I was trusted sufficiently, regardless of that, as being told about it.
So, do I just understand this correctly? This is June 1993. You think you would have been trusted to be one of the few persons who knew about picketing outside a Boots director's house, but not trusted enough to be told about a planned disruption of the Grand National by running onto the course in April?
Well, that was certainly the case, yes.
Can you think of any reason why you might have been let into the circle of trust on this in June, but not the Grand National in April?
Well, this is relatively benign. If all it is a noisy picket outside an individual such as this, there's I think the world of difference between that and the disruption of a national event, with all the sort of ensuing consequences and associated dangers. So this one's relatively benign. So even if they made the wrong call on this, nothing would be lost.
You say in your witness statement, paragraph 182, for those following, that you didn't take part in this picket. Is that right?
Yes.
And how are you able to recall that you didn't take part in this particular one?
Well, I can't with sort of 100% certainty, but I certainly don't remember being at it.
All right. If we take that down, please, could we have up on the screen MPS 0745818? It's another report that bears your identifier. It's from the 21st of January of 1994. And can we go over to look at the body of the report, please? It is a meeting of London Boots Action Group in January of 1994 now. And can we look at the third paragraph there, please, in that report, the larger of the paragraphs? Thank you. And Privacy announced that he had obtained a list of home addresses of directors of the Selfridge store, culled from publicly available information, but some of which is in fact out of date. He was eager to arrange future dates for demonstrations at such places. By contrast, George spoke of the futility of arranging surprise events at London Boots Action Group meetings, since the information would inevitably be passed to the police in advance. He accepted the effectiveness of the protest, but stated he would make his arrangements known only by word of mouth to certain individuals. And the report then goes on, in fact, just such a demonstration took place on Thursday the 13th of January, when a group of activists turned up outside an address in Privacy, believing it to be the home of Geoffrey Maitland-Smith, the chairman of Selfridges. It transpired, however, that he lived there no longer. I just want to ask you a number of questions about that section, please, HM1. Firstly, if we zoom out of that, please, this is reporting a meeting on the 11th of January of 1994. But if we look down at the second page, please, the end should be the end, it's dated the 21st of January, so 10 days later. Can you explain how it might be that it could take 10 days for your reporting on a London Boots Action Group meeting to find its way into a formal intelligence report?
I'm afraid not. And the only reason I can't is because I wasn't part of the process. Once it was handed in, the rest of the machine took care of that side of the house.
If we go back, please, to the paragraph that we had on the screen before, the third larger paragraph. There is a comment there that says, in fact, just such a demonstration took place on Thursday the 13th of January. So, subsequent to the 11th of January meeting, but before your report is submitted, there is additional information about a demonstration taking place on the 13th of January. Is that likely to be intelligence that you reported, so you were able to say, in fact, they did carry out such a demonstration?
It's quite possible, yes.
Could we look, please, at the following paragraph in the report? Privacy suggested that in order to avoid the risk of the authorities obtaining details of such events, potential demonstrators could arrange to meet at a specific time and place and decide only there and then whom to target. In pursuance of this policy, activists intend to meet at Euston Station on Sunday, the 30th of January, prior to a home visit to what will probably be the address of a Boots or Selfridges director. So does it follow from this that it was announced at the meeting that there would be a meet-up on the 30th of January at Euston, or is that information you were able to obtain in another way?
So one, I don't recall, but if you look at what is suggested here, it's probably obtained subsequently.
And would you have obtained that by expressing an interest in taking part in the home visit?
I would have thought more it would have come to my attention by word of mouth and do you want to attend?
And this is one, is it that you did attend? If it assists you in your witness statement in relation to a report about an event on the 30th of January, you say you think you must have attended because there's a report on it.
Yes, well that must be the case then.
Could we just look at the cover sheet to this report, please, before we leave it? And zoom in on point 2 with all of the handwritten annotations. Thank you. The minutes on the cover of this report, HM1, indicate in handwriting the security office. The security offices for the Sears Group (Selfridges) is aware of the threat, as is Boots PLC. I think I asked you yesterday about whether you knew about your intelligence being shared, for example, with Boots. Do you think that your intelligence about these sorts of things was likely being shared with the private companies?
Not specifically, no, but the threat assessment, these organisations were afforded contributions to their own threat assessments by the animal rights movement.
So your intelligence would inform the threat assessment, which would inform the organisation?
Yes.
Can we take that report down and look at the report of what took place on the 30th of January, please? MPS 0739636. It's the 1st of February of 1994. And again, it bears your identifier, HM1. Sorry, so it's C207. And what we see from the report, if you want to check the cipher list for EAB, please do so before I carry on.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is reporting that EAB organised home visits to a number of directors of Selfridges department store on Sunday the 30th of January. Selfridges has been singled out because it sells fur goods. EAB was accompanied by a small number of London Boots Action Group members. They were made to addresses and those have been redacted for privacy. The protesters failed to contact anyone at the first 2 addresses, and at the third they were confronted with a video security system. After a brief period of abusive shouting, the protesters left the area, threatening to return at a later date. To prevent any leakage of information, the targets for the excursion had deliberately not been divulged to the activists before they assembled at Euston Station in the morning, and then the comment is this form of harassment is seen by animal rights activists to be a powerful form of protest which is likely to remain popular. As I mentioned before in your witness statement, you say you think you must have attended this. Do you recall attending?
Not vividly, but I accept that I probably did.
Mr. Gravett gave evidence that he recalls you telling him that you went to the home of a Selfridges director, but Mr. Gravett remembers you saying that the director and his family were there in their garden and were upset by the visit. Do you recall attending a home visit of that description in connection with a Selfridges director?
I don't recall them being there in the garden, but I'm quite prepared to accept that I was there on that occasion.
The description here of a home visit is of the sort that you mentioned earlier, isn't it? The turning up, a bit of shouting, and then the protesters leaving the area. So very much at the lower end of the scale.
The ones we've been talking about here, yes.
Thank you. I'm about to move to a different topic. I wonder whether that's an appropriate moment for a break.
Certainly. We'll have our 15-minute break as usual. think it's that on the screen, the flat screen at the front of the desk. Yeah, I'll take that. But we can do that.
Thank you. HM1, moving from London Boots Action Group onwards. In September 1994, London Boots Action Group merged with other groups and London Animal Action was formed. Is that about right in terms of your recollection?
Yes.
Can we have on screen, please, MPS 0741031, a report of the 23rd of September of 1994. It's your C277, sir. 272, I'm sorry. Thank you. A report bearing your identifier. And can we look at the report itself, please? All right, this is described as a monthly planning meeting of London Boots Action Group. And if we look, please, at the first two paragraphs of the report, the body of the report, it records that as a result of the prolonged debate during recent months regarding the future name and composition of the London Boots Action Group, the following decisions were finally reached. 1. The group would now be known as London Animal Action, a name it was felt which more accurately reflected the nature of the organisation as the principal animal rights group in London, dealing with a wide range of animal liberation and welfare issues. It would, of course, maintain its open policy of being fully supportive of direct action. So in terms of, from the point of view of you as an undercover officer, this was, in a sense, more or less a continuation, was it not, of London Boots Action Group, rather than a change of much significance? Or do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that. I think it was everything that London Boots Action Group was, but it went beyond the focus just of an anti-boots campaigning group.
And in terms of the personalities involved, Mr. Gravett remained involved certainly at the beginning, in the early days of London Animal Action, didn't he?
Yes, that's as I recall.
And beyond Mr. Gravett, the personalities involved in London Animal Action overlapped, did they, with those involved in the London Boots Action Group?
Yes.
Can we take that down, please, and look at a report on the inaugural meeting of London Animal Action? And can we scroll down, please, to the report itself? Thank you. And can we look at the first paragraph to begin with, please? So, reporting on the inaugural meeting of LAA, formerly the London Boots Action Group, the report says it attracted an array of well-known activists, all keen to make a go of the new group, which already has the support of a range of animal rights groups around the capital, which hitherto had shunned London Boots Action Group. Are you able to assist now with the basis for the assertion there that LAA had the support of animal rights groups around London which had shunned London Boots Action Group?
Well, only as I recall, was sort of the correspondence between the groups, participation at each other's activities, events, and I think a reflection that other groups didn't necessarily want to be specifically linked to or constrained by a boots focus. So by definition, it had a broader catchment zone of support and interest.
Right. Can we zoom out, please? And I want to have a look at the third paragraph, please, beginning the pooled funds. And the report also records that Paul Gravett had negotiated the shared use of an office for LAA at London Greenpeace 5 Caledonian Road. So does that communicate that London Animal Action was to share an office with London Greenpeace?
That's how it reads, yes.
And did you, as a result, as somebody involved with London Animal Action, thereby gain access to offices that were used also by London Greenpeace on Caledonian Road?
No.
Did you ever go to the office on Caledonian Road?
Well, I might have done with Paul.
And when you went to that office, were you conscious of the fact that it was an office also used by London Greenpeace? Presumably yes, based on this report.
Yeah, but it had no particular significance in that respect.
At the time, at around this time, what was known as the McLibel litigation was ongoing. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Involving Helen Steele and Dave Morris as the primary defendants at that stage. Did you have access to paperwork through the office used by London Animal Action that was concerned with the McLibel litigation?
No.
Did you have access to paperwork linked to the McLibel trial in any other context?
No.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I had absolutely no involvement. I didn't even really have any interest in that particular campaign.
You knew that the campaign existed, did you?
Oh yes, it was very well known.
I'm going to ask you to have a look at two exhibits, HM1, and in fairness to you, I'll make it clear you won't have seen these before. They were provided to the inquiry very recently, this month, by Helen Steele. So I'll give you a good chance to look at them. Can we start, please? They don't have control numbers on them yet, but they are HS54A and 54B. I don't know if they can be put on the screen at the same time. Can we just, just to ensure the text on the image on the right, there's more text, I think, at the bottom that we can't see at the moment. Is it possible to expand that box so that HM1 can see it all at once? Expand it downwards. Oh, that'll do. Thank you. Well, at HM1, I will explain. Ms. Steele has submitted an additional witness statement in which she says that on the right-hand side of the screen as we look at it, so 54A, her exhibit 54A, it is a leaflet that was put out by the McDonald's Corporation during the course of the McLibel trial and included in a court bundle, which is, I assume, why you see the numbered tabs here, a court bundle that was used by her and David Morris as defendants in the litigation. And what she says is that they obtained that leaflet that we see there on 54A from you, and that 54B is your handwritten note when you provided the leaflet to the campaign, if not directly to Miss Steele, then perhaps to Mr. Morris or someone associated with the campaign. And I'll read that the handwritten note reads, Hounslow, 9th of July 1994, 4 p.m, handed out by staff to me, and then the signature and name, M. Rayner, appear underneath. Do you recall obtaining a leaflet of that nature and handing it either to Helen Steele, Dave Morris, or somebody else associated with the campaign?
It doesn't stand out, but I can see that I did. I mean, that's my handwriting. It sort of rings a vague bell.
And in what circumstances might you have come to provide to the McLibel defendants or the McLibel campaign a leaflet that you had been handed in McDonald's?
Possibly at a picket or a demonstration. It's hard to imagine because I don't actually remember being handed one, but an event in support of the campaign. Very, very rare that I attended any of those as far as the McLibel campaign was concerned, but it's highly possible.
Thank you. We can take that down. Is it possible that you had more contact with the McLibel campaign or the McLibel defendants than you recall without being shown documents like that?
No, I mean, the reason I'm absolutely certain I had so little involvement, it was just a campaign that was so distant from what I was involved in. I wasn't even particularly, even within my sort of cover, or particularly interested in it, and certainly wasn't prepared to devote time to it because it didn't seem sufficiently close to the other activities and lifestyle that I was involved in.
Going back then to your involvement in London Animal Action, there came a time when you became a signatory on the London Animal Action bank account. Do you recall that?
Yes.
The report we have puts that at April 1995.
Yes.
And was that a role that was akin to being a treasurer or something similar within the group?
Well, I guess so. If you had to put a title to it, its roles and responsibility was taking collection tins and bags of coins to the Co-op Bank and being a co-signature on cheques.
So cheques made out by the group to other entities or other individuals?
Yes, I was one of the signatures.
And in your witness statement, you say you became the signatory because Paul Gravett asked you to be. Is that right?
Yes.
You also say in your witness statement that you were happy to carry out this role because it showed and encouraged trust in me, and you say it enhanced your credibility and by extension your access to information known only by a trusted few. In what way did being the signatory encourage trust in you and enhance your credibility and access to information known only by a trusted few?
Well, I think if you are entrusted with the funds of the group, there's a direct correlation between the level of trust that's being placed in you. And then in terms of what the money was being used to support and fund, to the very limited degree there was money available for any of that, it provided that level of visibility.
It involved taking on a position of trust and responsibility vis-a-vis the group, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yes, it was a level of trust that I had then.
Did anybody or did any of your managers know, presumably yes, because it was in a report, that you had taken on this role?
Yes.
And did you consult them before doing so?
Yes, absolutely.
And why absolutely?
Well, I was quite pleased to have been asked.
So you considered it something to be proud of?
Yes.
Did you ask them because you thought there was any chance that it might be frowned upon that you should take a position of trust and responsibility within a group on which you were reporting?
Well, I wanted that to be part of the collective, if you like, authorisation process, that this was appropriate.
And when you checked with your managers, did they approve, disapprove? What was their reaction?
Yes, they did approve.
What was the nature of the discussion you had? Can you recall?
I think it was one in which the implicit levels of trust being a little more formalised with a position of responsibility with funds is a stage, and it was a discussion around whether it was appropriate to say yes to that.
And was there any shadow of a doubt as to whether you should say yes to it?
No, there wasn't, and I think the context of the discussion was, what does it actually involve, and how much money are we talking about, and what is the sort of the daily responsibility? And it was, as I described earlier, largely the sort of collection of money from collecting tins, taken to the co-op, and then being a co-signature on the distribution of those funds to campaigning.
The focus of London Animal Action's efforts in its relatively early days was in part demonstrations outside or in connection with fur shops and the fur industry, is that right?
That was a big part of it.
And you were involved, were you not, in pickets of a shop called Noble Furs?
Yes.
And thereafter a furrier or company, Hockley's?
Yes.
you participated regularly, I think, in the pickets of noble furs, is that right?
Yes.
And what did that involve?
A picketing of a shop during opening hours at weekends, and leafleting.
And by picketing, you mean standing outside, maybe leaflets, banners,
Yes.
that sort of thing?
Yes, that's absolutely it.
Could we have up on the screen, please, MPS 0741050? It's a report of the 15th of November 1994 about a monthly meeting of LAA. It's C285, sir. And if we can scroll down, please, to the body of the report. Thank you. I want to focus on the third paragraph, please, HM1. Brendan McNally reported that the picket of noble furs was continuing and was having some success. However, some visitors to the fur picket had caused a souring of the friendly relationship between police and demonstrators, causing the police to try and stop them collecting donations to the cause. It was emphasised that cooperation with the police was imperative, lest the picket be closed down before the fur shop had felt the full effect of a continual picket, and thereby a valuable opportunity to raise money would be lost. Does that description fairly reflect the attitude of the protesters in the noble fur pickets to the police who policed the demonstrations?
Not all of them, but some, hence Brendan's advice.
Sorry, I should have been clearer, it's my fault. Were the majority of those who picketed interested in cooperating with the police in order to ensure the success of their picket longer term?
Okay, yes, absolutely. It was a focused campaign, not against the police, but against the fur trade.
But the intervention, such that it was, of the police in keeping those pickets in order such that it was required, was not unwelcome as far as those who were doing the picketing was concerned.
No, because mainly as long as the picketing confined itself to leafleting and non-obstruction of the highway as it was, the police would be happy for it to take place.
And the protesters were, by and large, complying with the instructions of the police, save for the few that are mentioned here by Brendan McNally?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Was that typical of the nature of the pickets that took place outside Noble Furs and other fur shops under the guise of London Animal Action in 1994-95?
Well, I think wherever there was a police presence, this balance between being allowed to stay there and not antagonising the police and thereby getting our message across, and it was deemed to be successful in just being there and almost being a sort of physical deterrence to potential shoppers. That would have been deemed a success in its own right. So that the police allowed that to happen was really not to be interfered with.
Understood, thank you. Can I ask about another aspect of the activities that you appear to have taken part in under the guise of London Animal Action, and that is protests concerning the live animal exports that were taking place, which I think you attended some with London Animal Action and actually London Boots Action Group, but is this right? They were organised under the banner of the South East Animal Rights Coalition, or the Animal Rights Coalition. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, it does. The focus, that was another big campaign. The focus of the demonstrations was the port through which animals were travelling.
Yep, so we see, I'll come to the examples, but we see some actions at Dover, which was one of the ports, is that right?
Dover was one, Shoreham another.
Yeah, and I think there were also protests at Coventry Airport, is that right?
Yes.
All right. Could we have up on screen, I'll go broadly chronologically, if I may, MPS 0739405. This is the 17th of November 1992, so within a year of your deployment commencing HM1. So it's C99. And we see your identifier on the cover sheet to this report. And if we look It's a report about something that took place at the Dover Eastern Docks. The organisation at the top is the South East Animal Rights Coalition. 100 to 150 present. Other organisations, London Boots Action Group. Does that tend to indicate that your involvement in this was through the London Boots Action Group?
Yes.
And we see no disorder occurred, mood vociferous, frustrated. And if we look, please, at the body of the report, we see the demonstration called by the South Eastern Animal Rights Coalition to protest at the export of live animals by ferry companies, especially Sea Link Stena Line. Disorder had been anticipated by local police who were present in large numbers, thereby preventing the demonstrators from obstructing entry to the ferry port or preventing the movement of livestock trucks arriving there. The protesters had to content themselves with hurling a few eggs at lorries and shouting abuse. The event was judged a success because of the media coverage obtained, and the forthcoming series of monthly pickets will go ahead in an attempt to persuade Sea Link Stena to abandon the carriage of live animals. So, as I understand, you're reporting that it's the presence of a large number of police who prevent obstruction to the ferry port, is that right?
Yes.
So does it follow from that your understanding was that the intention of the demonstration was to obstruct entry to trucks carrying live animals?
Yes.
But instead what happened was some throwing of eggs at lorries?
Yes, that took place.
That's unlikely to have caused too much of a nuisance to the lorries, is that fair to say?
Yeah, because most of it was prevented. This was an ongoing, I think this is one snapshot of what was a regular set of campaigns.
The report records that the event was judged a success because of media coverage obtained. Was that one of the main aims of those protesting, to draw attention to the practice of exporting animals, live animals, in trucks in this manner?
Yeah, that certainly was an important part of that campaign.
It goes on, the report, to refer to activists, 8 activists from the London Boots Action Group leaving the demonstration and making their way to Dover Town Centre, where they harassed staff in Boots and McDonald's by the now routine method of seeming to purchase goods, but leaving without taking or paying for them, and subjecting the helpless employees to tirades of abuse. The Imperial Cancer Research Fund shop came in for the same treatment. Were you one of the 8 activists from London Boots Action Group who engaged in that behaviour?
I was certainly present as part of the picketing of Boots.
So one of the 8 who went into Dover Town Centre?
I would imagine so. I do remember going into Dover Town Centre with London Boots Action Group.
And did you engage in behaviour of the sort described there, putting goods together as if you were going to purchase them but not paying for them or taking them?
No, so I know for a fact I didn't do that.
And how is it that you know for a fact that you didn't do that?
Because I've never done that.
So, as a member of one of only 8 from London Boots Action Group who went to do that, to what extent did you stand out from the crowd, not taking part in that sort of activity?
I think others, not everyone was doing, others had leaflets to hand out, maybe a bit of supporting noise. It was a fairly impromptu wandering around at random, non-planned. I don't think it was particularly long-lasting.
Is there any reason why your report from the time doesn't explain that of the 8 activists who went to Dover Town Centre, only some of them engaged in the behaviours that are recorded there?
No, not really, but that describes a general mood and the adoption of a type of campaigning which had been used before.
Would it not be useful to identify which activists were involved in that sort of activity?
Yes, it would, and I don't know whether I've done that elsewhere when talking about more specifically individuals, but yes.
But you're quite sure that it wasn't you involved as one of them?
In the harassment and...
Yes.
Yes.
Can we take that report down, please? I want to ask you about some other actions associated with the South East Animal Rights Coalition, again, broadly chronologically. MPS 0739800, please. The 23rd of March 1993, C146, sir. And we see your identifier there on the first page. And in the body of the report, it's decided, before we zoom in, the report itself, we see it's a demonstration, 30 to 35 attended. It was said to be good-humoured and no disorder but see below in the heading to the report. And then if we do zoom into the body of the report, please. It says this: demonstrators from the London, Brighton, Portsmouth, Hastings and Maidstone areas assembled in Hawkhurst to take part in this SEARC coordinated event. Having formed no real prior plan as to what exactly was likely to ensue, the first 20 or so activists to arrive at the farm entered the complex and, in the absence of any effective opposition from the owner or his employees, donned their masks and, led by Privacy and Jeff Shepherd, attempted to locate the slaughterhouse itself. By the time the remaining protesters arrived from Hawkhurst, it had been decided that police might arrive at any moment, and therefore a routine demonstration was then held at the entrance to the farm. When asked about this, in your witness statement, you said that you didn't enter the farm complex, but that you were present in relation to this demonstration, HM1. How did you know that there was no real prior plan as to what exactly was likely to ensue? Does that indicate that you had been involved in the planning such that it was for this event?
No, it indicates that I hadn't been made privy to any plan. It didn't occur to me there was, beyond the we are going to protest outside this particular location.
Well, it's not saying you weren't privy to a plan, is it, when it says having formed no real prior plan as to what exactly was likely to ensue? That's a comment on the activists not having made a plan, positively, isn't it?
Yeah, my impression of it was that an opportunity presented itself on arrival, and people responded to that opportunity beyond any plan, just to campaign routinely with leaflets and shouting.
And so the first 20 or so to arrive, in fact, go into the complex, put on masks and attempt to locate the slaughterhouse. That's your report. How did you know what the first 20 or so did on arrival unless you were amongst them?
Well, I think I might have been. I don't recall this event vividly, but maybe it's perfectly feasible I drove people.
So you may have driven them there, but the report doesn't suggest that of the first 20 or so to arrive, only some of them entered the complex, does it?
No.
So does it follow that you entered the complex?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I didn't enter the complex, that's for sure. But on arrival, people did.
Why does the report not make a distinction between some of the first 20 entering and some of them not, if that's the case?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Did you know that some of those who were attending had masks with them before you arrived?
No.
Did you know that people were contemplating entering the complex?
No, wasn't aware of what we were going to do other than work it out when we got there.
Can you think of any reason why people would have gone in possession of masks if all that was really planned was a routine demonstration of leafleting and the like?
Well, that suggests there might have been a plan, but I wasn't privy to it.
So your best recollection is that you drove some people to the event but didn't get involved?
That is my recollection. It is a long time ago and it really doesn't stand out, I'm afraid.
We can take that down, please. The other sort of action that was engaged in by the South Eastern Animal Rights Coalition, or under the banner of the Animal Rights Coalition, was home visits again. Is that right? Do you recall that? And if we pull up on the screen, please, MPS 0739693. It's C176. It's a report dated the 14th of September 1993. Now, before I ask you, HM1, about this, it has your unique identifier on the cover page, but when asked in your witness statement, you were not confident that this was your reporting in fact. But I just want to see if any of it rings a bell. Could we have a look at the body of the report, please? It's a report on a meeting of the Animal Rights Coalition in Nottingham in September of 1993. And I want to look, please, at the first 2 paragraphs of the body of the report. Which the report says the following items of note were discussed at the meeting. A, the holding of unannounced demonstrations at the home addresses of animal abusers has been found to be an effective and virtually risk-free way of instilling fear into the victim and his family. Ronnie Lee commented that the wearing of masks or balaclavas not only concealed the identity of protesters, but also added to the air of menace. It is envisaged that this form of demonstration will become more widespread, with leading figures from the pharmaceutical, medical research and meat industries and from the hunting fraternity being singled out for attention. Whether or not you recall reporting that information, HM1, does the nature of it chime with what you were hearing whilst deployed undercover in regard to home visits?
Well, it doesn't conflict with it, but I do recall reading this and thinking this isn't mine, not least because I don't ever recall being at a meeting in the presence of Ronnie Lee, but your question itself is it certainly doesn't conflict with a view that was held.
To what extent were the home visits that you either were involved in or knew about, to what extent did you consider that those who were taking part were hoping or intending to instill fear into the target of the visit?
I was just aware, so whether I sort of clinically distilled it in that way, I was just aware that in terms of the wider picture on what these home visits had led to and were capable of leading to, there was the whole spectrum of campaigning on the streets and disappearing, to the leafleting of neighbours, to the more threatening knocking on doors, and then associated with articles in the press. So you had the full range and spectrum of the nasty stuff and the sort of semi-legitimate.
Right. Can I just, when you say associated with articles in the press, can you explain what you mean by that, please?
Yeah, so some of in sort of literature used by the animal rights movement to campaign against individuals, for example, at the helm of the vivisection movement, or those involved in live exports, those concerned with the fur trade and the owner of fur outlets in London. Part of the media campaigning against them was through the use of media.
But what does that have to do with home visits?
Well, it was part of the either the we know where you live type messaging, and in some cases the dropping of accusations through neighbours' letterboxes as to the nature of the individual they were living next to.
In your experience of home visits, direct experience, how often did those engaging in the visit wear a mask or balaclava whilst engaging in the visit?
I think on the rare occasion I was involved in the home visit, I didn't see much of that.
Did you understand that those who you went on home visits with, or with whom you discussed home visits, wanted to arrive with an air of menace, as is suggested here?
So those that I went on, there wasn't that. There would far more often be, once you got there, putting a scarf around you to conceal your identity, but it wasn't. Those I went on was not with a view to turning up as a balaclavaed, menacing bunch of individuals.
Thank you. Can we take that down, please?
Before we do, can
Sorry.
we just look at the second page? If you look down the list of those noted as identified as attending, it includes Matt Rayner, your cover name. Is there anybody else who could possibly have produced this report, naming you, other than you?
Well, I think not knowing everyone who was there or recalling everyone who was there, in a group such as this with this number of people, there were other people who were cooperating with the police that could have given information about this group. The meeting, sorry. There's quite a large number of people there. Sorry, sir.
Forgive me. This goes out under the name of the DCI then in charge of the SDS. The SDS did not run non-police informants, did it?
No, correct.
So, excluding then a non-police informant, I'm not aware of any other undercover officer deployed at this time who might have produced this report.
The problem I have with it, so I'm not denying I was there, I really don't recall being there. But its content, even if I wasn't, doesn't sort of look odd in any shape or form.
So it's 30 years ago, lapses of memory are entirely understandable, but in the light of what I've just said to you, is the likelihood that this is your report and you did attend the meeting, even though you now do not remember its detail?
I think it's possible, so I really do. I would have expected this to have stood out a little bit more than it is doing, so that's clearly a failing on my part if I was there and I now can no longer remember over 30 years ago.
Thank you.
So just, I think just worth mentioning, although it doesn't change the nature of the questioning, that this is at a time when Andrew Coles was also deployed alongside HM1. So his name does not appear, his cover name does not appear on the report.
Indeed, but he is unlikely to have put in the name of someone he would know as a fellow undercover officer.
Yes, I
in
was
his cover name.
simply just adding some information to the picture that there was another animal rights deployment at the same time.
Acknowledged, but I am not aware of any and do not remember any suggestion that this was Coles's report.
Can we take...
So am I allowed to come in?
Of course.
So on the subject of why would I be there, so sometimes that is there with a view to getting that report to a wider audience, that absence of me might have actually identified, if someone else is reporting that I was there, as an undercover SDS officer. So sometimes there was a hiding in plain sight, if you like, on a covert report for a wider audience.
So by a rather roundabout means, it is possible that your name is put there to divert from the fact that this is not your report. Is that what you're saying?
It's possible that I was there, but I wasn't the author.
Yeah. I think we're all agreed, are we not, that the fact that you are named means that you must have been at the meeting, whether or not this is your report.
Yeah, I think that we must assume that. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we take that down, please? And another report relating to the Animal Rights Coalition, MPS 0245731. It's a report dated the 29th of November 1995. It's your C405, sir. And this HM1 is a report of a national meeting held in Oxford in November of 1995. Yes, you have this report so that it's clear. It doesn't have a cover sheet, but because of its date and its control number, I can tell you that it was found on a hard drive recovered from the SDS at the end of the life of the SDS. Right, so it was on a computer, and it will have been attributed to you by the inquiry because it will have appeared or have been found in a folder bearing an identifier used by the SDS and linked to you. Do you follow?
Yes.
All right, I'll pause for that to be checked. That ought to be the case, but that don't take it as read that it definitely is in a folder with your identifier until somebody's checked. All right, but it's found on an SDS hard drive that I'm confident of. Can I ask you, I'm not going to ask you the detail about the meeting, but if we scroll down, please, to the end of the report. Sorry, the end of the body of the report, thank you. And I want to look, please, at the final 3 paragraphs of it in particular. And they read as follows. Considering the nature of those activists present, it was hardly surprising the high level of enthusiasm that greeted Privacy's suggestion that before people started going home, a home visit be made to Professor Colin Blakemore. It is fair to say that Blakemore remains probably the most hated figure in the vivisection industry, and indeed is considered the leading protagonist and representative of the particularly abhorred science. Leaving in 2 convoys, one led by Privacy and the other by Privacy, about 25 activists descended upon Blakemore's home. Unsuccessful in soliciting any answer from the door, activists engaged in bouts of shouting abuse. Barry Horn wasted no time in investigating the passages down either side of the house, and much attention was given to the security cameras and windows. Suffice to say that everyone left after a quarter of an hour without any untoward incident having occurred. Are you able to assist as to how commonly this sort of spontaneous home visit occurred after meetings, or would this have been an unusual occurrence?
I think unusual in terms of that level of spontaneity.
More usually something that was planned and thought about in advance?
That was my experience.
In your witness statement, it's paragraph 246, you say that you remember participating in this home visit to Mr. Blakemore's home.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, I do recall vaguely.
And you recall it being spontaneous, and you say that your involvement was limited to adding your voice to the shouting outside the house. Is that right?
Yes.
Why did you take part in the home visit, attended, it appears, by only a proportion of those who had been at the larger meeting?